Tony Bennett seemed like the nicest guy in music. He worked with everyone from Lady Gaga to Frank Sinatra, but behind those smiling photos was a dark secret. For decades, he carried hatred for one singer that ate at him daily, something even his closest friends didn't know. Near death in 2021, Bennett finally broke his silence, revealing that this was not just professional jealousy but something deeply personal and bitter hidden for more than 50 years. Born Anthony Dominic Benedetto on August 3, 1926, at St. John's Hospital in Long Island City, Queens, he was the first in his Italian immigrant family to be born in a hospital. His parents had come from Italy in search of a better life, but in New York they found poverty and struggle. Their crowded apartment in Astoria was cold, with coal stoves barely keeping them warm, and food was never certain. Tony remembered how a hot meal was not always guaranteed. His father, a grocer with fragile health, worked long hours despite a serious heart condition and no life insurance, and every setback weighed heavily on the family. Neighbors admired the Benedettos' resilience but saw how John's illness and constant money troubles pushed them to the edge. Tragedy struck in 1936 when Tony was just 10. His father died at 50, leaving his mother Anna to care for Tony, his sister Mary, and brother John Jr. already crushed by the Great Depression. The family now faced even deeper poverty. Anna worked as a seamstress in a sweatshop, stitching piece after piece for long hours and little pay, while rent and eviction threats loomed. Soup kitchens became part of their weekly routine, but the loss of his father also gave Tony a compassion and humility that never left him. That same year, he experienced his first moment of recognition when, at just 10, he was chosen to sing at the opening of the Triborough Bridge before a crowd that included Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, who patted him on the head afterward. The moment convinced Tony his voice could carry him beyond hardship. By 13, the need to support his family made him a singing waiter in Italian restaurants across Queens and Long Island City. In a worn white jacket, he carried pasta and pizza to tables, then stepped up to sing, his rich, controlled voice impressing everyone. Patrons thought he was just a talented boy, but every song he sang was putting food on his family's table. He later said those restaurants taught him more about people and music than anywhere else, shaping his natural, conversational singing style and teaching him humility. His artistic talent also bloomed. He was accepted into the School of Industrial Art in Manhattan, known for shaping painters and designers. Even before that, at PS 41, he was a class caricaturist, sketching classmates and teachers with a sharp eye. At the art school, he dreamed of becoming a commercial artist and later credited those years with influencing his painting and even the way he approached music. But dreams had to wait. At 16, he dropped out to help his family survive, working as a copy boy at the Associated Press, a grocery clerk, and an elevator operator. The jobs paid little, but every dollar mattered. Still, he never gave up singing, performing at amateur nights in clubs and theaters, keeping his passion alive. In 1944, at 18, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, serving with the 63rd Infantry Division in the brutal final stages of World War II. He saw combat in France and Germany, sang with military bands when he could, and lived through horrors like the Battle of the Bulge, where nearly 19,000 Americans died. He remembered freezing nights in foxholes and the constant fear of German attack. Those experiences made him a lifelong advocate for peace. After the war, the GI Bill allowed him to study music at the American Theatre Wing School under vocal coach Mimi Spear, who told him not to imitate singers but to learn from instrumentalists. Inspired by jazz greats like Art Tatum and Billie Holiday, he developed a style all his own. In 1949, struggling through smoky sets in Greenwich Village clubs under the name Joe Barry, he got the break of a lifetime when Pearl Bailey walked in. Already a star, she was struck by his phrasing and emotion, and that very night invited him to open her show. More than kindness, it was a bold move in the divided world of post-war entertainment. Bailey didn't just share her stage. She shared her connections, introducing him to the people who could change his life forever. That single night set off a chain of events that soon brought Bob Hope into Tony Bennett's path. Not long after Pearl Bailey's endorsement, Hope slipped into a nightclub where Bennett was singing. At the time, Hope was one of America's most powerful entertainers, a man who could make or break careers. Bennett later recalled pouring his heart into the performance, unaware that Hope was in the audience. When the set ended, Hope did something unusual. He came backstage. He told the young singer, "You have something very special. I'm going to put you on my show." It was a promise few performers ever heard. And for Bennett, it was a moment everything changed. Hope invited him to open his upcoming show at the Paramount Theater in New York, a legendary stage where Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby had performed. To a singer fresh out of small clubs, it felt like stepping straight into history. Before that Paramount debut, Hope made one more suggestion. He told him the name Joe Barry wouldn't work, and his real name, Anthony Benedetto, was too long for marquee. On the spot, he came up with something simpler, something the world would remember: Tony Bennett. That new name opened doors, and Bennett would later say he owed his career to Bob Hope. The Paramount shows in late 1949 proved to be his turning point. Thousands of fans packed the theater, and Bennett had to learn quickly how to handle the kind of crowds that once caused Sinatra riots. Intimidated at first, he soon discovered how to control performance, pace himself, and command a room. The exposure spread his name across the country, and record companies began to take notice. In 1950, Columbia Records signed him, placing him alongside the biggest stars in music. Under producer Mitch Miller's guidance, Bennett refined his style into something unique, learning to focus on every note and phrase and to sing with pure emotion rather than just melody. Recording at Columbia's 7th Avenue studio, he began a partnership that would last nearly 6 decades, producing more than 70 albums and 50 million records sold worldwide. His breakthrough came in 1951 with Because of You, which reached #1 on July 14th and stayed there for 10 weeks. The song sold over 1 million copies, earned him a gold disc, and launched him onto television and national tours. That same year, he proved his versatility by recording Hank Williams' Cold Heart, a bold move for a New York pop singer. His version topped the charts for 6 weeks, sold over 1 million copies, and even won praise from Williams himself for bringing country music to new audiences. Then, in 1953, Bennett delivered a defining hit of his early career, Rags to Riches, which soared to #1 and stayed there for 8 weeks. Its triumphant lyrics captured post-war America's spirit, and the song sold more than 2 million copies, later appearing in films like Goodfellas and The Godfather, cementing its place in popular culture. Fans requested it more than any other song, even decades later. By 1965, Bennett had scored 24 singles in the top 40, with hits like Stranger in Paradise, Blue Velvet, and Just in Time. Even as the Beatles dominated in 1964, Bennett's When Joanna Loved Me still charted, proving his staying power. He attributed his success simply to loving songs people remembered. His work with jazz legends was equally groundbreaking. Recording with Count Basie in the mid-1950s, he moved beyond polished pop into daring jazz explorations. Sessions with Stan Getz began skeptically, but Getz changed his mind after hearing Bennett improvise during rehearsal. Collaborations with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers shocked critics who thought hard bop could never mesh with Bennett's smooth voice, yet the result was some of the era's most innovative jazz vocals. Cornet player Bobby Hackett once said Bennett was the only pop singer who could swing like an instrument. These projects weren't just experiments. They were transformations that risked commercial success in the name of artistry. In 1957, Bennett released A Beat to My Heart, his boldest break from the pop machine, despite Columbia's warnings. Featuring jazz drumming giants like Art Blakey, Chico Hamilton, and Joe Jones, the album was recorded live with minimal overdubs, capturing raw energy. Critics at first dismissed it as too experimental, and initial sales were modest at 50,000 copies, but its influence was lasting. On one track, Lullaby of Broadway, Bennett scattered alongside the band, something unheard of at the time. The album later earned praise from Frank Sinatra, who admitted it taught him how to swing. Just a year later, in 1958, Bennett and Count Basie recorded Basie Swings, Bennett Sings. At first, Basie resisted, dismissing Bennett as too pretty for his hard-swinging band. That changed one night at Birdland in New York, when Bennett stunned the crowd with a searing version of Penny from Heaven that won Basie's respect. The album was cut in just 3 days at January with a full 16-piece band. Its opener, Jeepers Creepers, featured Bennett trading riffs with a horn section in a playful call and response never before heard on a commercial record. The result was a triumph, selling more than 250,000 copies in its first year. Decades later, studio tapes revealed that Bennett had spontaneously rewritten many of the vocal arrangements during the sessions, inventing melodies on the spot. Basie himself admitted it was the only vocal album where he felt the singer became part of his band. Then came the defining moment of Bennett's career. On January 23, 1962, at Columbia's famed 30th Street studio, he recorded I Left My Heart in San Francisco. The song had sat on his piano for 8 months, dismissed as too sentimental, and on the day of the session, Bennett arrived with laryngitis, his voice so strained the orchestra had to lower the key twice. Yet in just 2 takes, he delivered a performance whose emotional depth was heightened by the rasp in his voice. The single reached number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100, remained on the charts for 36 weeks, sold more than 1 million copies, and won him his first gold record. It also earned 2 Grammys, including Record of the Year, and in 1969 was adopted as San Francisco's official theme song. But music was changing. The Beatles' arrival in 1964 ushered in a rock revolution, and Columbia pushed Bennett to adapt. In 1970, he reluctantly released Tony Sings the Great Hits of Today, covering Beatles songs beneath a psychedelic album cover that clashed with his image. The project was a disaster. Rock fans ignored it. His loyal audience rejected it, and he admitted feeling physically ill while recording. His record sales collapsed, and his personal life fared no better. He had married Patricia Beach in 1952, a 19-year-old art student, in a St. Patrick's Cathedral wedding where 2,000 women dressed in black veils as if attending a funeral. 2 sons followed, Danny in 1954 and Day in 1955, but Bennett's relentless touring strained the marriage. By 1965 they had separated, and in 1969 Patricia filed for divorce, citing his affair with actress Sandra Grant. When the divorce was finalized in 1971, Bennett married Sandra that December, a swift move that shocked fans and damaged his clean-cut image. In 1972, after refusing Columbia's demand for more rock covers, Bennett ended his 20-year partnership with the label. He signed briefly with MGM's Verve division, then launched his own label, Improved, in 1975. Though he recorded 5 albums, including acclaimed collaborations with pianist Bill Evans, the label folded in 1977 due to poor distribution and mounting financial troubles. Without a contract, Bennett sank into debt while living beyond his means in Los Angeles with Sandra. By 1977, the IRS was threatening to seize his home over $2 million in unpaid taxes. That Thanksgiving, his mother Anna died, and the loss pushed him deeper into depression. Cocaine became his escape, and Sandra later admitted his drug use nearly killed him. By the late 1970s, he was reduced to small Las Vegas shows, a shadow of the star he once was. In 1979, overwhelmed by debt, grief, and addiction, he overdosed on cocaine in a bathtub. Sandra found him unconscious, revived him with chest compressions, and rushed him to the hospital. Bennett later described the moment as a near-death experience, recalling a golden light that filled him with peace and a sense of divine intervention. He vowed to quit drugs and rebuild his life. At 53, at the lowest point of his career, he called his sons Danny and Day and confessed, "Look, I'm lost here. It seems like people don't want to hear the music I make." Ironically, the Sons had been part of a short-lived rock band, Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends, hardly the saviors one would expect for a fallen jazz pop legend. Yet Danny saw what others missed. While he lacked his father's voice, he had a sharp business sense. He moved Tony back to New York, cut expenses, and began managing his career with bold, unorthodox strategies. That decision marked the beginning of one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. Instead of chasing popular trends, Danny moved Tony away from the stale Las Vegas image and booked him at colleges and small theaters, reaching younger audiences who had never heard American standards performed live. In 1986, he brought his father back to Columbia Records, the same label that had dropped him in 1971, but this time with full creative control. The first release from the New Deal, The Art of Excellence, became Tony's first charting record since 1972. Danny also set up surprising collaborations with rock bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, opening doors to entirely new audiences. By 1990, Tony's IRS debt was fully paid, and his career was back on track. Even during his struggles in the 1970s, he had never stopped exploring his love for jazz, working closely with pianist Bill Evans on the Tony Bennett Bill Evans album in 1975 and together again in 1977. Sessions later praised for their honesty and intimacy, even if sales were modest at the time. He also performed with jazz greats like Ruby Braff and George Barnes, projects that would later be recognized as some of his best work. Then in 1994, at the age of 68, Bennett stunned the music world by appearing on MTV's Unplugged, a series known for grunge and alternative acts, not classic crooners. His performance became the second highest-rated episode in the show's history, and the live album went platinum, selling over 1 million copies. In 1995, it won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, only the fourth live album ever to achieve that honor. The performance included memorable duets with K.D. Lang and Elvis Costello, and when Bennett told the crowd, "Let's do this without a microphone," the rawness of his voice captured the spirit of the show perfectly. Away from the stage, his personal life took a surprising turn in 2007 when, at 81, he married Susan Crowe, a woman 40 years younger. Their connection seemed destined. Tony had first met her parents in the 1960s when her mother was pregnant with Susan, and the two later met in the 1980s after a concert when she was 19 and he was nearly 60. Susan eventually became president of his fan club, and after dating for 2 decades, they married in a private New York ceremony on June 21, 2007. Though Bennett admitted the age gap had been difficult at first, he said their shared interests made it irrelevant, and she remained by his side through his final years, caring for him after his Alzheimer's diagnosis. Professionally, his late career shined brighter than ever. In 2006, as he turned 80, he released Duets, an American classic, which debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with more than 202,000 first-week sales and featured Paul McCartney, Elton John, Barbra Streisand, Stevie Wonder, Billy Joel, Bono, and Tim McGraw. Unlike many duet albums, Bennett insisted on recording each track in person with his collaborators, proving that American standards could still thrive in the modern music world. In 2011, at age 85, he released Duets 2, which debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, making him the oldest living artist ever to do so. The album, which sold 179,000 copies in its first week, included performances with Lady Gaga, Mariah Carey, Norah Jones, John Mayer, Aretha Franklin, Carrie Underwood, and a posthumous duet with Amy Winehouse on Body and Soul, her final recording before her death. The track was deeply moving, and Danny Bennett called the album's success historic, proof his father's artistry had not dimmed. In 2014, Bennett and Lady Gaga reunited for Cheek to Cheek, which at age 88 gave him yet another number 1 album with 131,000 first-week sales. Filled with jazz standards by Cole Porter and George Gershwin, the project was accompanied by a tour and a PBS special, Cheek to Cheek Live, which became cultural events, including the first-ever 4K stream concert from Lincoln Center. The album produced 2 number 1 singles on the Jazz Digital Songs chart and proved that jazz still had a place in modern music. Throughout his career, Bennett won 20 Grammy Awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2001, and uniquely, he remained the only artist to win Grammys across a span of more than 50 years, beginning with his 1962 win for I Left My Heart in San Francisco and concluding with his final Grammy in 2022 at age 95 for Love for Sale, his second collaboration with Lady Gaga, which won Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album. Most of his Grammy victories came after the age of 60, defying industry expectations about aging artists. Beyond music, in 1999 Tony and Susan founded the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in Astoria, Queens, where Bennett had grown up, opening in 2001 with 250 students and later moving to a permanent campus in 2009. The school featured world-class facilities, from a 750-seat concert hall to dance and art studios, and consistently maintained high graduation rates. It became a symbol of Bennett's lifelong belief that arts education could change young lives. Then, in 2021, the public learned that Bennett had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2016, a truth his family had kept private for 5 years. Despite his illness, Tony Bennett continued to perform 90-minute concerts flawlessly, astonishing his doctors. His neurologist explained that while Bennett struggled to recognize objects, his musical memory remained remarkably sharp. Lady Gaga later shared that he had always disliked Martin Scorsese's portrayal of Italians in his films, even though Scorsese had featured his music in classics like Goodfellas. That same year, Bennett released his final album, Love for Sale, at the age of 95, a tribute to Cole Porter that made him the oldest person in history to release an album of new material. The record debuted at number 8 on the Billboard 200, and the 59 years between that album and his first top 10 record in 1962 set a new milestone. The sessions were deeply emotional, with Lady Gaga moved to tears as she watched a friend deliver powerful vocals despite his illness. On July 21, 2023, Tony Bennett passed away peacefully in Manhattan at the age of 96, just 2 weeks before his 97th birthday. Over his lifetime, he released more than 70 albums, sold over 50 million records, and won 19 competitive Grammys, most of them later in life. His family remembered him as a man who always found joy in singing, from his early days as a singing waiter in Queens to his final performances in 2021. The Alzheimer's Association praised him as a champion for the cause, noting that even in his final years, he continued to inspire the world with his voice and his heart.